Captain Jake Morrison stood at the viewing window of the UES Horizon, watching the massive alien space station grow larger as they approached. The structure was unlike anything humans had ever built. It looked more like a giant flower made of metal and light than a space station. Curved petals of gleaming material spiraled outward from a central core, each one the size of a city. "It's beautiful," said Dr. Lisa Grant, stepping up beside him. She was the ship's chief scientist and the person Earth had chosen to make first contact with alien life. "Look at those patterns. They don't build like we do at all." Jake nodded, but his eyes were scanning the station for defensive positions and weapon systems, old habits from his military days. He couldn't see any obvious weapons, which either meant the aliens were very good at hiding them or they didn't think like humans did about defense. "Captain, we're getting a signal," called Lieutenant Ben Carter from the communications station. Ben was their security chief, a former Marine who Jake trusted completely. "They want us to dock at Petal 7, whatever that means." "Dr. Grant, are you ready for this?" Jake asked. Lisa straightened her uniform and picked up her translation device. Earth's best minds had worked for months to create a basic communication system based on the math and science signals the aliens had sent. "As ready as anyone can be for meeting aliens, I suppose." The docking went smoothly. The alien stations. Systems guided their ship into a bay that seemed to reshape itself to fit the horizon perfectly. Jake had never seen technology like that. As they prepared to leave the ship, he made sure Ben and 2 other security officers were armed but keeping their weapons hidden. The airlock opened, and Jake got his first look at real aliens. There were 3 of them waiting in the docking bay. They were tall and thin, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow softly. Their faces were oval-shaped with large, dark eyes that took up almost half their heads. They had no visible hair, and their movements were slow and graceful, like they were floating through water. The one in front stepped forward and made a complex gesture with its long, delicate hands. When it spoke, the translation device turned its musical sounds into words. "Welcome, beings of Earth. I am Ambassador Kayla Vex of the Zephyrian Council. We greet you in peace and wonder." Dr. Grant stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Thank you, Ambassador. I am Dr. Lisa Grant, representing the people of Earth. We are honored to meet you." As they walked through the station's corridors, Jake noticed how different everything was. The walls curved in impossible ways, and soft light seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Other aliens they passed stopped to stare at the humans. Jake saw dozens of different species, some that looked like walking plants, others that seemed to be made of living crystal, and creatures that defied easy description. But they all had one thing in common. When they looked at the humans, especially at Jake and Ben, their eyes showed something that Jake recognized immediately: fear. Ambassador Kayla Vex led them to a large chamber filled with representatives from what she called the Galactic Federation. There were hundreds of different alien species present, and the noise of all their different languages being translated created a constant buzz in the air. "The Federation has existed for over 50,000 of your years," Kayla Vex explained, as they walked. "We have 847 member species, all living in peace and harmony. You would be the 848th. Jake found that hard to believe. In human history, getting 3 countries to agree on anything was difficult. Getting almost 850 different species to live in peace seemed impossible. The ceremony was formal and beautiful. Each species had a representative who spoke about peace and cooperation. Dr. Grant gave a speech about Earth's hopes for friendship and learning. Everything was going perfectly. Then the explosions started. The lights went out, and emergency alarms began screaming. Jake's military instincts kicked in immediately, while the aliens around them began making high-pitched panic sounds and running. In all directions, Jake grabbed Dr. Grant and pulled her behind a stone pillar. "Ben, report!" he shouted over the noise. "Multiple explosions throughout the station," Ben replied, his weapon already in his hands. "Looks like someone's attacking the main power systems." More explosions rocked the chamber. Jake could see alien creatures fleeing in pure terror, many of them simply freezing in place or curling up into balls. None of them seemed to know what to do when faced with violence. "Lisa, stay here," Jake ordered. "Ben, take Stevens and Rodriguez and head for the power center. I'll organize an evacuation of this chamber." "Captain, shouldn't we wait for station security?" Dr. Grant asked. Jake looked around at the chaos. Aliens were trampling each other in their panic, and he couldn't see any security forces anywhere. "I don't think they have security like we do." Jake ran into the crowd of terrified aliens and began shouting orders. At first, they didn't listen. They were too scared. But something about his voice, his confidence in the face of danger, began to calm them. He organized them into groups and directed them toward the emergency exits that his trained eye had spotted when they first entered. Ambassador Kayla Vex appeared beside him, her large eyes wide with shock. "How do you remain so calm? The attackers could kill us all." "That's exactly why we need to stay calm," Jake replied, helping a group of small, furry aliens toward an exit. "Panic kills more people than bombs do." Ben's voice crackled over the comm system. "Captain, we found the attackers. 6 individuals. Some kind of radical group protesting human admission to the Federation. They're using stolen mining charges. Can you stop them?" "Already done, sir. They surrendered as soon as they saw us coming. Within 20 minutes, the crisis was over. Station power was restored, the attackers were in custody, and the evacuation was complete. Not a single life had been lost, though several aliens had been injured in the panic." As Jake and his team regrouped in the main chamber, he noticed that every alien in the room was staring at them, but the fear in their eyes had changed. It was mixed with something else now, awe, gratitude, and a deep confusion. Ambassador Kayla Vex approached him slowly. "Captain Morrison, in 50,000 years of Federation history, no member species has ever responded to violence the way you just did. Your people moved toward danger instead of away from it. You organized, you fought, you protected others. This is unprecedented." Dr. Grant joined them, looking shaken but unharmed. "Ambassador, don't your people have military forces, police, anyone trained to handle emergencies?" Kayla Vex's expression was difficult to read, but her voice carried a note of something that might have been shame. "Dr. Grant, you must understand. Every species in the Federation evolved from what you would call prey animals. Herbivores, scavengers, creatures that survived by hiding or running. The concept of fighting back, of moving toward danger to protect others. This is completely alien to us." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you saying we're the first predator species you've encountered?" "Yes, Captain Morrison. And now we understand why the idea of your people joining the Federation has caused such debate. You are unlike anything we have ever seen. You are hunters." The word hung in the air like a judgment. Jake looked around at the hundreds of alien faces watching them, and he finally understood the fear he had seen earlier. These beings had evolved to run from creatures like humans. Their instincts, developed over millions of years, told them that humans were dangerous. And today, Jake realized, they had proven those instincts right. But they had also proven something else, that sometimes the hunters could be the protectors too. As they prepared to return to their ship for the night, Ambassador Kalavex spoke quietly to Dr. Grant. "Your species terrifies us, Dr. Grant. But today you also saved us. We do not know what to make of this contradiction." Dr. Grant looked back at Jake and Ben, who were calmly discussing security improvements with some very nervous alien officials. "Maybe that's something we can figure out together, Ambassador. Maybe that's exactly why the galaxy needs us." Admiral Kate Phillips walked through the corridors of Federation Station Alpha, trying to ignore the way every alien she passed either fled in the opposite direction or pressed themselves against the walls. 6 months had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Federation, and things were not going well. "Admiral, you have another meeting with the Zephyrian Council in an hour," her aide, Lieutenant Danny Martinez, reminded her as they walked. Danny was young and eager, fresh out of the academy, and still amazed by everything alien. Kate envied his enthusiasm. "Let me guess," Kate said with a tired smile. "More complaints about human behavior? Actually, this time it's a request for help. Pirates hit another trade convoy in the Outer Rim. The Zephyrians want to know if we can provide escort services." Kate stopped walking. "Pirates? I thought the Federation had been at peace for thousands of years." "Apparently not anymore, ma'am." Dr. Tony Walsh was waiting for them in Kate's office, surrounded by data tablets and looking frustrated. Tony was Earth's top psychologist, assigned to study alien behavior and help humans understand their new neighbors. His research was not painting a pretty picture. "Kate, we have a serious problem," Tony said, without greeting. "Look at these stress readings from aliens who work closely with humans." Kate examined the data on his tablet. The numbers were alarming. "These look like readings from trauma victims." "That's exactly what they are," Tony replied. "Every alien species in the Federation shows the same pattern when interacting with humans. Elevated heart rate, stress hormones through the roof, fight or flight, responses constantly activated. They literally cannot help being terrified of us." Kate sat down heavily in her chair. "But we've been nothing but friendly. We've helped them, protected them, shared our technology." "That's what makes it worse," Tony explained. "Their instincts tell them we're predators, apex predators, the most dangerous thing they've ever encountered. But their logic tells them we're allies. The contradiction is driving them crazy." Lieutenant Martinez looked confused. "But sir, aren't they overreacting? We're just people." Tony pulled up another display. "Danny, let me show you something. This is video from yesterday's joint training exercise between human and Zephyrian engineers." The video showed a simple problem-solving exercise. Human and alien engineers were supposed to work together to repair a damaged power relay. At first, things went well. Then one of the humans, Engineer Carol Blake, made a sudden movement to grab a tool that was falling. Every alien in the room immediately froze, crouched down, or backed away. Their large eyes went wide, and several made high-pitched distress calls. Carol looked around in confusion, not understanding what she had done wrong. Carol's movement was perfectly normal for a human, Tony explained. Quick, decisive, efficient. But to the aliens, it looked like a predator pouncing on prey. Their brains couldn't tell the difference. Kate rubbed her temples, feeling a headache coming on. "So what do you recommend, Doctor?" Before Tony could answer, Kate's communication system buzzed. "Admiral Phillips, this is Captain Sam Rodriguez on Patrol Ship Defender. We have a situation out here." Kate activated the view screen. Sam's face appeared, streaked with sweat and grime. Behind him, she could see the bridge of his ship, with sparks flying from damaged systems. "Report, Captain." "We were escorting a Zephyrian trade convoy when pirates attacked. The alien ships immediately scattered and ran." "I'm talking about a complete panic, Admiral. They left their cargo behind and just fled." Kate frowned. "What about—" "Their security escorts?" Sam gave a bitter laugh. "What security escorts? Admiral, these people don't have any kind of military. When the pirates showed up, the alien guards curled up in balls and waited to die." "What's your status now?" "I managed to drive off the pirates, but barely. My ship took heavy damage, and I was outnumbered 10-1. The good news is that the pirates seemed as surprised as I was that someone actually fought back. They weren't expecting any resistance." Kate looked at Tony, who was taking notes frantically. "Captain, how did the aliens react when you engaged the pirates?" "That's the weird part, Admiral. After I drove off the attackers, the Zephyrian crews came back. They were grateful, but also seemed terrified of me. One of their captains called me the Hunter Guardian and wouldn't look directly at me." After ending the call, Kate turned to Tony. "Doctor, I need answers. How do we work with people who are biologically programmed to fear us?" Tony was quiet for a long moment, studying his data. "Kate, I think I'm beginning to understand what's happening here. Every species in the Federation evolved from prey animals, herbivores, scavengers, bottom feeders. They survive by avoiding conflict, not by winning it. So they never developed the concept of warfare, of fighting back, of protecting others through violence. When faced with aggression, their only responses are to freeze, flee, or submit. They literally don't know how to fight." Kate thought about Captain Rodriguez facing 10 pirate ships alone, while the aliens he was protecting ran away. "But that means they need us," Tony finished. "We may terrify them, but we're the only species in their galaxy that knows how to deal with violence. Without us, they're helpless." The meeting with the Zephyrian Council that afternoon was uncomfortable. Ambassador Kalavex and her advisors sat as far from Kate as possible while still being in the same room. When they spoke, their voices were soft and submissive. "Admiral Phillips," Kalavex began, "we must discuss the pirate attacks. They are becoming more frequent and more bold." "I understand your concern, Ambassador." Captain Rodriguez filed his report. "How can we help?" The aliens exchanged glances, and Kate noticed their body language. They were huddled together like frightened animals, but they were trying to hide it. "We need more human ships to escort our convoys," another council member said. "Our own vessels cannot protect themselves." Kate leaned forward slightly, and several aliens immediately leaned back. She tried to keep her voice gentle. "Ambassador, may I ask why your species never developed military capabilities? Surely in 50,000 years you must have faced some threats." Kalavex's large eyes blinked slowly. "Admiral, you must understand our nature. When threatened, we run or hide. It has always been enough. The few aggressive species we encountered in the past were either avoided or they eventually destroyed themselves through violence." "But not anymore." "No. These pirates, they are different. They hunt us like we are prey animals. And perhaps we are." The sadness in the alien's voice made Kate's heart ache. She stood up carefully, moving slowly so as not to startle anyone. "Ambassador, humanity has a saying. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. We may frighten you, but we will never hurt you. That's a promise." Kalavex looked up at her with those huge, dark eyes. Admiral, we know you speak the truth, but understanding this in our minds and accepting it in our hearts are different things. When we see you, when we hear your voices, when you move with that predator's grace, every instinct tells us to run. But you don't run. No, we do not, because we have learned something new in these past months. We have learned that some predators can choose to be protectors instead of killers. You have shown us this. Kate felt a weight settling on her shoulders. The weight of responsibility for an entire galaxy of beings who had never learned to fight for themselves. There's something else, Kalavex continued. Our scientists have been studying the effect of human presence on our people. Those who work closely with humans are beginning to show changes. Tony Walsh leaned forward with interest. What kind of changes? They are becoming braver, more willing to face challenges directly. Some have even begun to show aggressive tendencies when protecting others. Our young people especially seem to be affected. Kate and Tony exchanged glances. Is this a problem? Kate asked. We do not know, Kalavex admitted. It is unprecedented in our history. Some of our leaders fear that humans are changing us into something we are not. Others believe that you are helping us become something we need to be. As they left the meeting, Tony was quiet and thoughtful. Finally, he spoke. Kate, I don't think we're just protecting them anymore. I think we're changing them. The question is, are we changing them into something better, or are we destroying what made them who they are? Kate looked out at the stars through the station's viewing windows. Somewhere out there, pirates were attacking innocent traders while their guards curled up in fear. Somewhere else, young aliens were learning for the first time in their species. History that sometimes running away wasn't enough. I guess we'll find out, she said quietly. But right now they need us. And maybe, just maybe, we need them too. General Ryan Brooks stood in the center of the training ground, watching his alien students attempt their first combat simulation. It was not going well. Half of them had curled up into defensive balls the moment the training robots appeared. The other half were running in circles, making high-pitched panic sounds. Computer, end simulation, Ryan called out with a sigh. The holographic training robots disappeared, but it took several minutes for the aliens to calm down enough to unroll themselves. Commander Luke Davis walked up beside him, shaking his head. General, I've trained Marines, Navy SEALs, and Special Forces operators, but this... He gestured at the trembling aliens. This might be impossible. Ryan had been chosen to establish the Federation's first joint military academy 3 months ago. The decision came after pirate attacks increased throughout the galaxy, and it became clear that the Federation needed some kind of defense force. The problem was that every alien species that volunteered for training had the same response to combat situations: pure terror. Let's take a break, Ryan announced to the group of 30 alien volunteers. They came from 12 different species, all supposedly the bravest and strongest their worlds could offer. Right now, they looked like frightened children. One alien approached him hesitantly. She was from a species called the Keth Mari, with gray skin and 4 arms. Her name was Zara Kim, and she had been the only volunteer who hadn't run away during the first day of training. General Brooks, she said in her soft, musical voice, I apologize for my people's behavior. We want to learn, but our bodies will not obey our minds. Ryan studied her for a moment. Zara Kim was different from the others. She still showed fear, but she fought against it instead of surrendering to it. What makes you different, Zara Kim? I grew up on a colony world near the Outer Rim, she explained. My family died in one of the first pirate attacks. I was the only survivor because I hid instead of trying to help them. Her 4 hands clenched into fists. I do not want to hide anymore. Commander Davis stepped forward. Zara Kim, would you be willing to try individual training? One-on-one instruction instead of group sessions? She nodded eagerly. Yes, Commander, I will try anything. Over the next 2 weeks, Ryan and Luke worked exclusively with Zara Kim while the other aliens attended lectures on military theory and history. The progress was slow and painful. Every training exercise triggered her prey instincts. She would freeze, panic, or try to flee. But each time she forced herself to try again. Dr. Amy Johnson, the Academy's anthropologist, observed. Many of these sessions, Amy was studying how exposure to human military thinking affected alien psychology. Her findings were both fascinating and disturbing. Ryan, look at these brain scans, Amy said one evening, showing him data on her tablet. This is Zara Kim's brain before training, and this is from yesterday. The differences were obvious even to Ryan's untrained eye. Her brain structure is changing? Not the structure, but the activity patterns. The areas that control fight-or-flight responses are being rewired. She's literally learning to override millions of years of evolution. Is that dangerous? Amy was quiet for a moment. I don't know. We're in uncharted territory here. What I can tell you is that she's becoming something her species has never been before. The breakthrough came during week 3. Zara Kim was facing a training scenario where she had to protect a group of civilians from attackers. As usual, her first instinct was to hide. But this time, instead of fighting that instinct, she used it. I cannot overcome my fear, she told Luke during the exercise. But I can choose what I am afraid of. I am more afraid of failing to protect others than I am of the attackers. She moved through the simulation with a strange mix of terror and determination. Her hands shook as she fired the training weapon, but her aim was steady. When the exercise ended, she had successfully defended all the civilians. Luke clapped her on the shoulder, grinning. Outstanding, Zara Kim. How do you feel? She looked at her 4 hands, still trembling slightly. I feel different. Wrong, but also right. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, Ryan said, joining them. You just learned something your species never knew before. You learned that sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to become something you fear. Word of Zara Kim's success spread quickly through the Federation. Some alien leaders were excited about the possibility of their people learning to defend themselves. Others were horrified at the idea of their citizens becoming violent. The controversy reached a peak when Ambassador Kalavex visited the Academy. She watched Zara Kim demonstrate her new skills in a combat simulation, her large eyes growing wider, with each display of controlled aggression. This is not natural, Kalavex said afterward, speaking to Ryan and Amy privately. She moves like a predator now. She thinks like one. What have you done to her? Amy pulled up her research data. Ambassador, we've given her the ability to choose. Her prey instincts are still there, but she's learned to make decisions despite them. She's still the same person, just with new capabilities. But at what cost? Kalavex asked. When she returns home, will her own people recognize her? Will they accept her? That question was answered a week later when a group of Keth Marie officials arrived to evaluate Zara Kim's progress. The meeting did not go well. You are no longer Keth Marie, Elder, Sylvan declared after watching Zara Kim's demonstration. You move with violence in your heart. You think thoughts of harm and conflict. You have become something alien to us. Zara Kim stood perfectly still, her 4 arms at her sides. Elder, I am still your daughter. I still value peace and harmony above all things. But I have learned that sometimes peace must be protected with violence, with strength, with the willingness to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. She gestured toward the training ground. Elder, our people are dying. The pirates grow bolder every day. Traditional Kethmari responses are not enough anymore. Elder Sylvan turned to Ryan. General Brooks, you have taken our child and made her into a weapon. How do you justify this? Ryan chose his words carefully. Elder, we didn't make her into a weapon. We taught her how to choose when to be a shield and when to be a sword. The choice is always hers. The debate continued for hours. In the end, the Kethmari officials left without reaching a decision, but their message was clear. Zara Kim was no longer welcome on her homeworld. That night, Ryan found her sitting alone in the Academy's garden, looking up at the stars. Zara Kim, are you all right? She was quiet for a long time. General, I have saved lives in the simulations. I have learned to protect others, but I have lost my people, my home, my identity. Was it worth it? Ryan sat down beside her. I can't answer that for you. But I can tell you this. Every human soldier faces that same question. When you choose to be a protector, you change. You become something different from the people you protect. It's the price we pay for keeping others safe. Do you regret it? The choice to become a soldier? Ryan looked up at the same stars she was watching. Somewhere out there, pirates were planning their next attack on innocent traders. Somewhere else, alien families were sleeping peacefully because humans like him stood watch. No, he said finally. I don't regret it. But I understand the cost. Over the following weeks, more aliens completed the training program. Like Zara Kim, they emerged changed. They moved differently, thought differently, reacted differently to threats. They were no longer purely prey animals, but they weren't predators either. They were something new. Dr. Johnson called them the adapted ones in her reports. Aliens who had learned to think like humans while retaining their own values and identities. They were bridges between 2 very different ways of existing in a dangerous universe. The program's success led to requests from dozens of other species, but it also led to protests and condemnation from traditional alien leaders who saw the changes as corruption of their people's essential nature. We're creating a new kind of person, Amy told Ryan as they watched the latest group of graduates practice formation flying. Not human, not traditionally alien, but something in between. Is that good or bad? I think it's necessary, she replied. The galaxy is changing, Ryan. The old ways of avoiding conflict aren't working anymore. These adapted ones might be the key to survival. Ryan watched Zara Kim leading a mixed group of humans and aliens through a tactical exercise. She had found her place as a bridge between species, translating human military concepts into forms that alien minds could understand and accept. You know what the real breakthrough was? Ryan asked Amy. What? We didn't teach them to be violent. We taught them that they could choose to be brave. Everything else followed from that. As if hearing his thoughts, Zara Kim looked over and nodded to him. In her eyes, Ryan saw something that hadn't been there when she first arrived. confidence. Not the confidence of a predator, but the confidence of someone who knew they could protect what mattered to them. It was the beginning of something new in the galaxy, something that both humans and aliens were still learning to understand. Fleet Admiral Chris Martin stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The red dots representing enemy ships outnumbered the blue dots of the Federation fleet by more than 1,000 to 1. This wasn't a battle. It was extinction. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the lead enemy vessel," reported Communications Officer Sarah White. Her voice was steady, but Chris could see the fear in her eyes. "Put it through!" The main screen flickered, and Chris got his first look at the enemy that had been terrorizing the galaxy's outer rim for the past 6 months. The creature that appeared was humanoid, but wrong in every way that mattered. Its skin was black as space, covered in what looked like natural armor plating. Its eyes were pure silver, without any visible pupils, and when it smiled, Chris could see rows of razor-sharp teeth. "I am Warrior Prime Zex Thul of the Devourer Fleet," the creature said in perfect Federation standard. Its voice was like grinding metal. "You are the humans we have heard so much about." Chris stepped forward. "I am Fleet Admiral Chris Martin of the Federation Defense Force. State your intentions." Zex Thul laughed, a sound that made several bridge officers flinch. "Our intentions? We intend to reclaim what was always ours. This galaxy belonged to the Devourers long before any of your pathetic prey species learned to crawl from their holes. The Federation has no record of your species." "Of course not. We left this galaxy 100,000 years ago, after we had consumed everything worth taking. But we have returned, stronger and hungrier than ever. And we find our territory infested, with weak, frightened creatures playing at civilization," Chief Engineer Paula Thompson whispered urgently to Chris. "Admiral, our sensors are picking up massive energy signatures from their ships. Their technology is at least 1,000 years ahead of anything we have." Captain Danny Reed, the fleet's intelligence officer, stepped up beside Chris. Danny had been studying the attacks for months, trying to understand the enemy's methods. His research had painted a terrifying picture. "Warrior Prime," Danny called. "Out. Our analysis of your attacks shows that you're not just raiders. You're systematic exterminators. You don't want territory or resources. You want to wipe out all life that isn't yours." Zex Thul's silver eyes focused on Danny with interest. "The human intelligence officer speaks truth. We are not pirates or conquerors. We are apex predators. And this galaxy is our hunting ground. Every species that draws breath in our territory is either food or competition to be eliminated." Chris felt his blood run cold. "What do you want from us?" "From you? Nothing. You are predators like us, which makes you the most dangerous prey of all. We will kill you first, then hunt down the herbivores at our leisure. It will take perhaps 50 years to cleanse the galaxy completely." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Chris looked around at his officers, seeing his own shock reflected in their faces. They had been preparing for war, but this was something else entirely. "Captain Reed, report. What do we know about these Devourers?" Danny activated his tactical display, showing the results of months of investigation. "Admiral, based on the attack, patterns, and some archaeological evidence we've uncovered, the Devourers were the original apex predator species of this galaxy. They conquered vast territories before mysteriously disappearing about 100,000 years ago." Paula looked up from her engineering station. "Admiral, that timeline matches some deep space sensor readings we've been tracking. We thought they were natural phenomena, but they could be signs of massive fleets moving through dark space. How massive? Chris asked, though he dreaded the answer. Conservative estimate? 10 million ships, sir. Maybe more. The number hit the bridge like a physical blow. The entire Federation fleet numbered less than 50,000 vessels, and most of those were cargo ships and civilian transports with minimal weapons. Danny, why did they leave the galaxy in the first place? Danny pulled up another display. Best guess? They ate everything. According to the archaeological record, entire star systems went dark during their original reign. Planets stripped bare, populations exterminated, ecosystems collapsed. They didn't just conquer, they consumed. Communications Officer White looked up with alarm. Admiral, we're getting reports from across the galaxy. The Devourers aren't just here, they're everywhere. Simultaneous attacks on dozens of Federation worlds. The tactical display updated to show the scope of the invasion. Red markers appeared throughout Federation space as world after world went dark. The pattern was clear and terrifying. The Devourers were systematically destroying every inhabited system they could find. Sir, Paula said quietly, at this rate, the Federation will be extinct within 6 months. Chris studied the display, his military mind racing through possibilities. Every scenario he could think of ended in total defeat. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy that had perfected the art of extermination over hundreds of thousands of years. Admiral, a new voice called from the communication station. We're getting a priority message from Earth. President Foster wants to speak with you immediately. President Maya Foster's face appeared on the screen, her expression grim but determined. Behind her, Chris could see the emergency command center that had been set up deep beneath the Earth's surface. Chris, what's our situation? Madame President, we're facing a complete extermination scenario. The enemy calls themselves the Devourers, and they appear to be the original apex predator species of this galaxy. They've returned to reclaim what they consider their territory. Maya's jaw tightened. How long do we have? 6 months, maybe less. They're systematically destroying Federation worlds, and they have the firepower to do it. Our combined fleet can't match even a small fraction of their numbers. What about our alien allies? Captain Reed stepped forward. Madam President, the alien fleets are in complete disarray. Most species are reverting to their basic prey responses, hiding, fleeing, or simply surrendering. The few that are trying to fight are being slaughtered. Maya was quiet for a moment, and Chris could see her processing the magnitude of the threat. Chris, I need you to understand something. Earth's survival depends on the Federation holding together. If the alien worlds fall, humanity won't be far behind. I understand, ma'am. Good, because I'm about to ask you to do something that seems impossible. I need you to turn a galaxy of frightened prey animals into an army that can fight apex predators. Chris looked at his bridge crew, then at the tactical display showing the vast Devourer fleet. Madame President, with respect, we've been trying to train them for months. Most alien species can barely handle basic combat training without having nervous breakdowns. Then we need to find another way. Chris, what makes humans different from the Devourers? The question caught Chris off guard. Ma'am? Both species are apex predators. Both evolved to hunt and kill. But we're not the same, are we? What makes us different? Chris thought about Zek's Thul's silver eyes, devoid of any emotion except hunger and cruelty. Then he thought about his own crew, afraid but still standing ready to protect billions of innocent lives. We chose to be protectors instead of destroyers, he said finally. Exactly. And that choice is what's going to save the galaxy. Chris, I'm authorizing the release of all classified military technology to the Federation. Every ship design, every weapon system, every tactical manual we have. Share it all. Paula looked up in shock. Madame President, that will give every species in the galaxy access to our most advanced military secrets. Maya smiled grimly. Engineer Thompson, in 6 months there might not be a galaxy left to keep secrets from. Besides, technology isn't what's going to win this war. What is? Chris asked. The thing that the Devourers never learned and can't understand. The ability to fight not for conquest or dominance, but for the protection of others. The Devourers see other species as food, or competition. We see them as people worth saving. As the transmission ended, Chris looked around his bridge. His crew was afraid. He could see it in their faces. But they weren't running. They weren't hiding. They were preparing to fight impossible odds to protect people they barely understood. Admiral, Zara Kim's voice came over the comm system. She was now serving as a liaison between human and alien forces. I have a request from the alien fleet commanders. Go ahead, Zara Kim. They want to know if you will teach them how to die with honor instead of in terror. Chris felt something twist in his chest. These beings, whose every instinct told them to flee from predators like him, were asking him to help them face the ultimate predators. Tell them, Chris said slowly, that I'm going to teach them something better. I'm going to teach them how to live with courage. As the combined Federation fleet prepared for the battles to come, Chris realized that humanity's greatest challenge wouldn't be defeating the Devourers. It would be proving to a galaxy of frightened prey animals that sometimes the monsters could choose to be heroes instead. President Maya Foster stood in the ruins of what had once been Federation Station Alpha, looking out at the aftermath of the greatest battle in galactic history. The station's massive structure was broken and twisted, but it was still there. More importantly, so were the billions of lives it represented. Field Marshal Gary Scott approached her, his uniform torn and blackened from the fighting. Gary had led the ground forces during the final assault on the Devourer command ship, and the experience had aged him years in a matter of hours. Madame President, the last of the Devourer forces have surrendered. It's over. Maya nodded, but her expression remained somber. What's the cost, Gary? Heavy. We lost 60% of the human fleet and 40% of our ground forces. The alien casualties were even higher. He paused, his voice growing soft. But they fought, Maya. Every single species in the Federation stood and fought when it mattered most. Dr. Claire Adams joined them at the observation window. Claire had made the discovery that changed everything. The scientific breakthrough that explained why humanity was different from every other predator species in the galaxy, including the Devourers. Claire, walk me through it one more time, Maya said. I want to make sure I understand what happened here. Claire activated her datapad, pulling up the research that had saved the galaxy. It all comes down to evolution, Madame President. Earth was what we call a death world. Extreme weather, natural disasters, mass extinctions. But most importantly, it was a world where cooperation was essential for survival. How so? Most predator species, including the Devourers, evolved in environments where competition was the primary survival mechanism. The strongest, most aggressive individuals lived and reproduced. But Earth was different. Humans evolved to be pack hunters who also formed protective relationships with other species. Gary nodded grimly. That's what the Devourers could never understand. They saw cooperation as weakness. The battle had lasted 3 days and nights. The Devourer fleet, numbering in the millions, had expected to face the same response they had, encountered for 100,000 years. Prey animals fleeing in terror. Instead, they found themselves facing something unprecedented. The Federation fleet, led by human commanders but crewed by mixed species, had fought with a coordination the Devourers had never seen before. Alien species that had never fired a weapon in anger learned to pilot human-designed fighters. Ground troops from dozens of different worlds worked together using tactics that combined human aggression with alien ingenuity. But the real turning point had come when Warrior Prime Zex Thul himself had boarded Federation Station Alpha for a final confrontation. Maya remembered watching the security footage later. Zex Thul had cut through the station's defenses like they were paper, his natural armor shrugging off weapons that would have destroyed a human. He had been heading for the command center, intending to kill the Federation leadership personally. Then, he had encountered Zara Kim. The alien who had been the first to complete human military training stood alone in a corridor, blocking the Devourer's path. She was half his size and armed with only a standard pulse rifle. By every measure of combat effectiveness, she should have been killed instantly. "You are not human," Zex Thul had said, his silver eyes studying her with curiosity. "Why do you stand in my way?" "Because someone needs to," Zara Kim had replied simply. The fight that followed had been brutal and one-sided. Zara Kim had been outmatched in every way: strength, speed, weapons, armor. But she had not run. She had not hidden. She had stood her ground and fought with everything she had, buying precious minutes for reinforcements to arrive. When human, Marines finally reached the corridor. They found Zara Kim broken and dying, but still alive. Zex Thul was standing over her, his weapon lowered, looking confused. "Why?" he had asked the arriving humans. "She could not win. She knew she could not win. Why did she not run?" It was Commander Luke Davis who had answered. "Because that's what we taught her. We taught her that sometimes you fight not because you can win, but because it's the right thing to do." Zex Thul had looked at the dying alien, then at the human soldiers surrounding him. "This is not natural. Prey animals do not sacrifice themselves for others." "She's not a prey animal anymore," Luke had said, "and neither are any of us." That conversation had led to the final confrontation between Maya and Zex Thul. The Devourer leader had demanded to understand how humans had corrupted the galaxy's prey species, turning them into fighters. "You want to know what makes us different?" Maya had asked during their final communication. "It's not that we're predators. You're predators too, and you're probably better at it than we are." "Then what?" "We learned that being an apex predator doesn't mean you have to be alone at the top. We learned to lift others up instead of keeping them down." Zex Thul had been silent for a long moment. "You speak of cooperation, but cooperation requires trust. How do prey animals trust predators?" "The same way predators learn to protect instead of consume," Maya had replied. "One choice at a time." The surrender had come suddenly. Faced with an enemy that fought not for territory or resources, but for the protection of others, the Devourers had found themselves in a type of conflict they had never encountered. Every victory felt hollow when the defeated fought with such selfless courage. Now, standing in the ruins of the station, Maya watched as human and alien work crews labored side by side to repair the damage. She saw Zara Kim recovered from her injuries and decorated as a hero by both human and alien governments. training a new group of mixed-species volunteers. "Madam President," a voice called behind her. She turned to see Admiral Chris Martin approaching, along with several alien dignitaries. "Admiral, how are our former enemies adjusting to captivity?" Chris smiled grimly. "That's what I wanted to discuss with you. We've had several thousand Devourers request to remain in Federation space rather than return to their fleet." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Really? Why?" "They want to learn what they call the human way. They've never seen cooperation between species before, and they're fascinated by it. Some of their younger individuals are even volunteering for the mixed species training programs." Ambassador Kalavex stepped forward. "Madam President, this presents us with an interesting opportunity. The Devourers possess technology and knowledge that could benefit the entire galaxy. If we can teach them cooperation and protection instead of domination and consumption, we turn our greatest enemies into our greatest allies," Maya finished. "Doctor," Adams nodded enthusiastically. "Madam President, think about it. The Devourers are apex predators like humans, but they've had 100,000 years to perfect their abilities. If we can teach them human values while learning from their experience, the Federation would become something unprecedented." Maya looked out at the stars, thinking about the future. The galaxy was safe for now, but there were other threats out there. Other challenges that would require all of their combined strength to face. "What does Warrior Prime Zex Thul say about this?" Chris consulted his datapad. "He's agreed to remain as a prisoner and cultural exchange subject. His exact words were, 'I wish to understand how prey can become predators without losing their souls.'" "And what did you tell him?" "That he was asking the wrong question. The real question is how predators can choose to become guardians while keeping their strength." Maya smiled for the first time since the crisis began. "Admiral, I think we're about to find out." Over the following months, the galaxy began to change in ways no one had expected. The mixed species training programs expanded to include reformed Devourers. Human tactical thinking combined with alien innovation and Devourer experience created new approaches to exploration, defense, and cooperation. But the most important change was philosophical. For the first time in galactic history, an entire civilization was organized around the principle that strength should be used to protect the weak rather than dominate them. Maya often thought about Zara Kim's words during the final battle. When asked why she had stood against impossible odds, the alien had said simply, "Because someone needs to." That phrase had become something of a motto for the new Federation. Not because someone could win, not because victory was certain, but because someone needed to stand up for what was right. The galaxy was still full of dangers. There were still conflicts, still challenges, still threats from beyond the known stars. But now there was something that had never existed before. A civilization based on the idea that predators and prey could choose to be something better together than they had ever been apart. Standing on the observation deck of the rebuilt station, Maya watched human instructors teaching reformed Devourers how to protect instead of destroy, while alien engineers shared their innovations with former enemies. Children from dozens of species played together in the station's gardens, learning cooperation as naturally as their parents had once learned fear. What makes humanity the most feared species in the galaxy? Maya asked herself, remembering the question that had started it all. The answer, she realized, wasn't that humans were the most dangerous predators. It was that humans had shown everyone else that they could choose to be something more than their evolutionary programming demanded. Captain Jake Morrison walked through the corridors of New Harmony Station, marveling at how much had changed in the 5 years since the Devourer War ended. The station was a joint project between humans, Federation species, and reformed Devourers, and it showed in every detail. The walls curved in the flowing style that aliens preferred, but they were reinforced with human engineering principles and decorated with Devourer artistic patterns that somehow managed to be both beautiful and intimidating. Children from a dozen different species ran through the halls, playing games. That would have been impossible before the war. "Uncle Jake!" a small voice called out. He turned to see Kira, Zara Kim's adopted daughter, running toward him. Kira was a young Keth Marie who had been orphaned during the early Devourer attacks. What made her special was that she had been raised by both humans and aliens, making her part of the first generation to grow up truly integrated. "Hello, little warrior," Jake said, kneeling down to her level. "How are your studies going?" Kira beamed up at him with all 4 arms spread wide. "Teacher Martinez says I'm the best in the class at tactical thinking, and Teacher Velnox says I'm very good at understanding different species' needs." Jake smiled. Teacher Martinez was human, and Teacher Velnox was a reformed Devourer who had become one of the station's most beloved instructors. The fact that a child could casually mention learning from both showed how far they had all come. "Where are you headed, Kira?" "To see the new arrivals. Mama Zara Kim said there's a whole ship full of people who want to join the Federation." Jake's expression grew more serious. The new arrivals were refugees from beyond Federation space, fleeing something they called the Silence. Nobody knew exactly what that meant yet, but it had the leadership concerned. "Captain Morrison," a voice called from behind him. He turned to see Dr. Amy Johnson approaching, looking excited but worried. Amy had become the Federation's chief expert on interspecies psychology and was now studying the refugees. "Dr. Johnson, what can you tell me about our new visitors?" Amy glanced at Kira, who was listening with obvious interest. Like all the new generation, Kira was incredibly curious about everything beyond her world. "It's okay," Jake said. "Kira's generation needs to understand what's happening in the galaxy. They're the ones who will inherit whatever we build here." Amy nodded and activated her datapad. "The refugees come from the Spiral Arm, about 50,000 light-years from here. They represent 4 different species, all technologically advanced, all fleeing from something they won't or can't describe clearly. What do they say about this silence?" "That's the strange part. They don't say anything. When we ask direct questions about what they're running from, they just stop talking. It's not that they refuse to answer, it's like they literally cannot form the words." Kira tugged on Jake's sleeve. "Captain Jake, are they scared like the Federation species used to be scared of humans?" Jake exchanged a look with Amy. The child's question was more insightful than many adult observations. "What do you think, Kira?" The young alien considered this seriously, her large eyes thoughtful. "I think they're scared, but not of us. They're scared of something else, something that makes them afraid to even think about it." Amy stared at Kira in surprise. "That's actually a very good analysis. Captain, I'd like Kira to meet the refugees if that's okay. Sometimes children can connect with traumatized individuals in ways adults cannot." They made their way to the refugee quarters, where Jake got his first look at the newcomers. There were about 200 of them, representing 4 species he had never seen before. One group looked like tall, graceful beings made of what seemed to be living crystal. Another species resembled humans, but with skin that shifted colors, like a chameleon. The third group were small, furry creatures with 6 legs and intelligent eyes. The fourth species were the most unusual. They appeared to be made of organized energy held in roughly humanoid shapes. What struck Jake immediately was their behavior. Unlike the Federation species, these beings didn't show fear of humans. But they didn't show much of anything. They moved quietly, spoke in whispers, and constantly looked over their shoulders as if expecting something terrible to appear. Zara Kim was working with a group of them, trying to understand their needs. She had become one of the Federation's best diplomatic liaisons, able to bridge the gap between human directness and alien sensitivities. "Captain Morrison," she said, approaching him, "I'm glad you're here. These people need help, but they're not responding to normal trauma counseling. What have you learned? They come from highly advanced civilizations. Their technology is actually superior to ours in many ways. But something happened to their worlds. Something that made them abandon everything and flee." One of the crystal beings approached them hesitantly. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "You are the humans we have heard about," it said. "The Predator Protectors." Jake nodded. "I'm Captain Morrison. We're here to help if we can." The crystal being's form flickered slightly. "We have traveled far to reach you. Our people said that if anyone in the galaxy could stand against the silence, it would be the species that taught prey to become hunters. Can you tell us what this silence is?" The being's crystalline structure dimmed, and it began to shake. We cannot, the words will not." It stopped speaking entirely, its form flickering more rapidly. Kira stepped forward without fear and gently touched the being's hand. "It's okay," she said softly. "You don't have to say the words. Can you show us?" The crystal being looked down at her with what might have been surprise. Slowly, it began to glow, and images appeared in its translucent body. The images showed beautiful worlds full of life and civilization. Then something began to happen to them. The images became unclear, but Jake could see cities going dark, populations simply disappearing. Not destroyed, not conquered, just gone. "They vanish," the being whispered. "Entire worlds, all life, all thought, all sound, just silence." Amy was taking notes frantically. "Is it a weapon? A disease? Some kind of natural phenomenon?" The being's glow faded. "We do not know. Our greatest scientists, our most powerful warriors, our wisest philosophers all tried to understand. Then they were gone too." Over the following days, Jake worked with Amy and Zara Kim to learn more about the refugees. The story that emerged was terrifying. The silence had been spreading through their region of the galaxy for over a century, systematically eliminating all life from world after world. It wasn't destruction in any conventional sense. The planets remained intact, the buildings were undamaged, but every living thing simply ceased to exist. "Captain," Amy said during one of their briefings, "I've been analyzing the refugees' psychological profiles. They're all showing signs of a very specific type of trauma." "What kind?" "The kind that comes from witnessing something that the mind cannot process. Whatever the silence is, it's so alien to normal existence that their brains are literally protecting them by refusing to remember the details." Jake thought about the crystal being's images. "But they remember enough to run." "Exactly. Their survival. Instincts override their mental blocks just enough to drive them to flee." The situation became more urgent when long-range sensors detected something approaching Federation space. It wasn't ships or any kind of technology they recognized. It was more like an absence, a region where space itself seemed empty of everything, including the background radiation that filled the universe. President Foster called an emergency session of the Federation Council. Leaders from every member species, including the reformed devourers, gathered to discuss the threat. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings," Foster began, "we face something unprecedented. The refugees' testimony suggests that we're dealing with a threat that can eliminate entire civilizations without leaving any trace of how it was done." Warrior Prime Zex Thul, now serving as a military advisor, spoke up. "Madame President, the Devourers have encountered many enemies in our long history. We have never heard of anything like this silence." Admiral Chris Martin activated the tactical display. "The phenomenon is moving toward Federation space at approximately 1 light year per month. At that rate, it will reach our outer colonies in about 3 years. "What do we know about stopping it?" asked Ambassador Kalavex. "Nothing," Chris replied grimly. "The refugees' people tried everything. Military force, scientific analysis, even attempting to communicate with it. Nothing worked." "Then what do we do?" asked one of the Alien Council members. Jake stood up from his observer's seat. "We do what we always do. We adapt." "Captain Morrison," Foster said, "please elaborate." "Madam President, every challenge we've faced as a Federation has been solved the same way. We combine human tactical thinking with alien innovation and reformed devourer experience. We find a way to be more than the sum of our parts." Zara Kim nodded from her seat. "The captain is right. The refugees came to us because they believe humans can stand against anything. But it's not just humans anymore. It's all of us working together." Young Kira, who had been given special permission to attend as a representative of the new generation, raised her small hand. "May I say something?" Foster smiled. "Of course, Kira." Dr. Claire Adams floated in the zero-gravity research lab aboard the science vessel Discovery, surrounded by holographic displays showing data that made no sense. For 6 months, the best minds in the Federation had been studying the silence, and they were no closer to understanding it than when they started. "Computer, replay sensor data from the Kepler-7 incident," she said, rubbing her tired eyes. The hologram showed the moment when an entire star system had been consumed by the silence. One moment, there were thriving colonies on 3 planets, space stations, and millions of people going about their daily lives. The next moment, there was nothing. Not destroyed, not vaporized, just gone. Even the star's light seemed dimmer, as if the silence had somehow taken part of its energy too. "Dr. Adams," called engineer Pete Wilson from across the lab. Pete was one of the youngest members of the research team, but his fresh perspective often helped them see things differently. "I've been looking at the quantum signatures from the affected regions." Claire pushed off from her workstation and floated over to him. "What did you find?" "It's weird. The space where the colonies used to be isn't empty. It's like nothing was ever there. The quantum foam, the zero-point energy, even the basic structure of space-time is different." Claire studied his readings. "That's impossible. You can't just erase the fundamental structure of reality." "That's what I thought too. But look at this." Pete highlighted specific data points. "In normal space, there's always background activity at the quantum level. Particles appearing and disappearing, energy fluctuations, all the stuff that makes space what it is. But in the silent zones, there's literally nothing happening." Before Claire could respond, An alarm sounded throughout the ship. Captain Beth. Parker's voice came over the communication system. All hands, we have an emergency situation. The Silence has changed direction and is now moving directly toward the Centauri system. Estimated arrival in 48 hours. Claire's heart sank. Centauri was home to one of the Federation's most important research colonies, including Dr. Tony Walsh's Xenopsychology Institute, where he was working with refugee trauma victims. Pete, pack up everything. We need to get to Centauri immediately. Discovery arrived at Centauri to find chaos. Evacuation ships were launching constantly, trying to get people to safety before the Silence arrived. But there were over 3 million beings on the various planets and stations in the system. They couldn't evacuate everyone in time. Claire found Dr. Walsh in his laboratory, working frantically with a group of refugee scientists. Tony looked exhausted and desperate. "Claire, thank goodness you're here," he said without looking up from his equipment. "We think we've found something important." "What is it?" One of the crystal beings from the refugee group stepped forward. Claire recognized him as Resonance of Truth, one of the few refugees who could speak about the Silence without going into mental shock. "Dr. Adams," Resonance of Truth said, his crystalline form pulsing with nervous energy. "We have been working with Dr. Walsh to understand why some of us survived when our worlds were taken." And Tony activated a holographic display showing brain scans from various species. "Claire, look at these patterns. The refugees who escaped all show the same neurological anomaly." Claire studied the scans. Their minds are partially disconnected from normal space-time perception. Exactly. It's like part of their consciousness exists slightly outside normal reality. We think that's what saved them. The Silence couldn't completely erase them because they weren't completely there to begin with. But that's just a few individuals out of billions. How does that help us? Resonance of Truth's form brightened. "Dr. Adams, what if the disconnection could be induced? What if we could shift entire populations slightly out of normal space-time?" Claire stared at him. "You're talking about fundamentally altering the quantum state of living beings. That's theoretically possible, but the energy requirements would be enormous." "Not necessarily," Pete said, joining their conversation. "I've been running calculations. If we use the star itself as a power source and create a resonance field throughout the system, we could shift everyone just enough to survive the Silence." Tony finished. Captain Parker appeared on the communication screen. "Dr. Adams, we have 36 hours before the Silence reaches the outer planets. Can this plan work?" Claire looked around at the mixed group of humans, aliens, and refugees all working together. "Captain, I honestly don't know. We're talking about something that's never been attempted before. We could save everyone, or we could accidentally kill them ourselves. What's the alternative?" Claire thought about the empty space where thriving worlds used to be. "There is no alternative. We have to try." The next 30 hours were the most intense of Claire's life. Teams of engineers from every species worked around the clock to build the quantum resonance generators. Human ingenuity combined with alien technology and refugee knowledge to create something completely new. Kira, now 10 years old, had insisted on staying to help despite the danger. She had a unique ability to communicate with the different species and translate complex ideas in ways everyone could understand. "Dr. Claire," Kira said as they made final preparations, "the crystal people are scared that the resonance won't work on their species because they're made of different materials than biological beings." Claire knelt down to Kira's level. "What do you think?" I think it doesn't matter what we're made of. We're all alive, right? We all have the same kind of life energy inside us. Out of the mouths of babes, Claire thought. Kira, you might have just solved our biggest problem. Instead of calibrating the generators for different biological types, they calibrated them for life itself, the quantum signature that all living things shared regardless of their physical form. As the silence approached the system's edge, every person on every world and station held their breath. The quantum generators activated, creating a field that slightly shifted all living matter out of normal space-time. Claire watched the sensors as the silence engulfed the first planet. For a terrifying moment, the planet seemed to flicker in and out of existence. Then the reading stabilized. The planet was still there, and so were all the people on it. "It's working," Pete whispered in amazement, but their celebration was short-lived. The silence wasn't just passing through, it was adapting. Claire watched in horror as the quantum void began to shift, trying to match the frequency of their generators. "It's learning," she said. "The silence is actually intelligent and it's figuring out how to counter our defense." Tony looked at the readings with growing alarm. "Claire, at this rate, it will break through our barriers in less than 6 hours. Then we need to be smarter than it is," Claire said grimly. Kira tugged on her sleeve. "Dr. Claire, what if we don't try to hide from it? What if we try to talk to it instead?" The adults stared at the child. "Kira, we don't even know if it's capable of communication. But we know it can learn," Kira pointed out with the simple logic of a child. "Things that can learn can usually understand." Claire looked at the approaching wall of nothingness that was systematically erasing everything in its path. It was the most alien and terrifying thing she had ever encountered. But Kira was right. It was showing signs of intelligence and adaptation. "Computer, modify the quantum generators. Instead of hiding our life signatures, I want to broadcast them directly at the silence." "Claire, that's insane," Tony protested. "You'll be telling it exactly where we are." "I'm going to tell it exactly what we are," Claire corrected. For the first time in its existence, the silence is going to encounter life that refuses to be erased quietly. As the generators switched from hiding to broadcasting, Claire sent out a message not in words or mathematics, but in the pure quantum signature of life itself. The message was simple. We are here. We are alive. We choose to exist. The silence paused. For the first time in recorded history, the wall of nothingness stopped advancing. It hovered at the edge of the system, as if, considering what it had encountered, then impossibly, it began to withdraw. Claire stared at the sensors in disbelief. "It's leaving." "Why?" Pete asked. "What changed?" Kira smiled with the wisdom of a child who had grown up in a galaxy where impossible things happened regularly. "I think it was lonely. It's been erasing everything for so long that it forgot what life was like. We reminded it." Claire looked out at the stars, watching the silence retreat toward deep space. She had a feeling they hadn't seen the last of it, but for now, the Centauri system was safe. "Captain Parker," she said over the communication. "System, stand down the evacuation. We're going to stay and figure out what just happened here." As the crisis passed, Claire realized that once again, the Federation had faced the impossible and found a solution through cooperation and the courage to try something completely new. But more importantly, they had learned that even the most alien and terrifying force in the universe might not be truly evil, just lost and in need of understanding. The question now was what they would do with that knowledge.